Thank you. Yeah, hopefully won't get fed back to our CEO. Afternoon. Yeah, I'm Will from the AA. I'm going to talk, so as the title says, a little bit about a transformation journey, basically, that I've taken at the AA. It's relatively high level because I realise there's kind of B2C and B2B marketeers here. And I think it hopefully gives you some insight and some tips as to how you might go about a kind of strategic journey, laddering basically what your CEO wants to achieve from a business perspective and a strategic perspective into a marketing strategy. And as part of that, because of the fact that the AA is quite a legacy business, there's elements in there about actually a transformation journey. So how you go about transformation basically with legacy. So that's the plan. First of all, the AA, if you don't know, and quite a lot of younger demographics don't know the AA, which is part of our challenge, is the Automobile Association, was the official name back in the day, formed in 1905. And essentially it's the yellow van company. So it's not Alcoholics Anonymous. If you want to move on to the other session, that's fine if this isn't what you wanted. But basically it's yellow vans. And part of the challenge has been, this is what we're known for. There's actually a lot more that the AA does, and there's a lot more that you can tell in terms of a marketing story about the brand more broadly. But just for complete clarity, that's what we do. And the core thing we are known for is a breakdown company. So ultimately, when you have a problem with your vehicle, wherever it is, by the side of the road, at home, wherever, out and about, the AA come out in their vans and they come and help fix your vehicle, take it to a garage and get you back on the road. The interesting thing is I joined this brand 4 years ago. I'd been in telco prior to that, and I joined the AA, a driving brand ultimately, and everyone stopped driving almost immediately. 2 weeks into the role, COVID happened. So there was no one on the roads apart from this one guy here who's driving along. So a really interesting kind of existential crisis almost of what you do as a driving brand that talks to drivers when nobody's driving. Then, just to keep me on my toes, EVs started to gather momentum, so the driving kind of landscape changed a little bit as well. Again, very interesting, how do you adapt as a brand to that? And when I first arrived at the AA 4 years ago, this is the type of advertising we were going out with. We were working with Red Dwarf, and we were talking about the future of breakdown today. I had an open mind, but I went into the business thinking, okay, let's get a sense check on this advertising and how people are feeling. First of all, within the AA, how they felt about it. And what I interestingly got back was it didn't resonate with what the business felt what needed to talk about. It didn't represent the product that we were working on in the best way. And when I asked people what they thought of the brand, they basically said we were kind of a middle-aged, pale cricketer. British cricketer. Now, there's nothing against cricket. I like cricket. But I think there was something there that was quite clear in my mind that was, first of all, a brand that is known just for breakdown, which in a world of ever-changing driving needs and younger drivers, particularly looking at convenience much more in the way that they get things via apps, the digital landscape, how does our brand evolve? With that in mind, thinking about the broader driving ecosystem and driver landscape, but also a fundamental problem in we are perceived as something that is different from what our kind of advertising is trying to tell people and what internally people believe the business to be. So what I did, essentially, under the context of private equity taking over the business a couple of years into my tenure, is essentially take a bit of a step back, and I just think it's quite useful for all of us probably to hear a bit of this. Again, I said it's quite top level, but hopefully you take some interesting insights from it, because it certainly helped me kind of defining how I went about the challenge, particularly in an organisation where, I don't know about you guys here, but not many other people really understood marketing well enough, that it wasn't really represented that well at senior exec level. So there's a job to actually convince people within the organisation about the role of marketing and the importance of marketing, but also, as you do that, improve the processes and the kind of ways of working and the outputs. What I found useful was ultimately questioning everything. questioning is like the core, I think, of what we should all be doing as marketeers. We should be curious, we should be understanding why stuff is or isn't working, understanding it better as a result of questioning, and then obviously defining off the back of that. I think from my experience, quite often when I've worked in marketing teams before, there's a lot of number 3 going on and defining and making things happen without doing steps 1 and 2. And to get to that, what I ultimately did was split it into 3 core themes, which is what I took the CEO and the exec journey on, which was, what is it that we're trying to achieve? Who is it that we're talking to and want to talk to? And why? Why do they even care? Why do we exist? What is it about this brand that we can leverage? So we start with the what. Ultimately, this is the core, I think, of how you transform a business. And it doesn't have to just be a transformation thing. This could be a go back into work tomorrow and actually question what the objective is that you're trying to achieve in year 1, year 2, year 3 of your marketing mission as part of what the business mission is. So the important thing for me was getting under the skin of what is the desired business narrative and trajectory, and that's particularly important with private equity, right? Because there's a tenure, you need to understand, well, what is it we want to achieve, by when, and to what extent, and so on. That then means, if you nail that everything you do is laddered back up to what your CEO and what the business wants. So it's not rocket science, but for me, what a big learning has been, if everything I do is rooted in what that first thing is, then that's always going to be a winner in terms of how the exec perceive what I'm trying to do. It's also worth questioning, what is and isn't working. Sometimes you can learn a lot, right, from what isn't working in a business. And why? Particularly with the AA, there's a lot of people who've been there 20, 30 years. There's quite a lot of legacy mindsets. I was listening to one panel earlier and they're talking about how businesses acquire and grow. The AA is the ultimate form of a sort of octopus with 1,000 tentacles of acquisitions. So to unpick that and understand why we do certain things in certain ways is really critical. And to face into that in a constructive and positive way, so that you are going to piss people off as part of doing it, but you wouldn't kind of be transforming if that wasn't the case. And then importantly, kind of what's needed to achieve the what is also another thing that I've learned from doing this. So it's very easy to think, oh, great, and sign up to it almost and say, brilliant, right, that's 3-year strategy. We're going to then hit that KPI. We're all on the page, that sort of thing. And then you sort of get back to your desk and you're like, shit, I'm going to need to ask for more budget there. I'm going to need that team. So having clarity on how you achieve that mission, I think is really critical too. So what is it you want to achieve? The second thing is who, so understanding the context. And I think this is important for both your customer base, but also the broader market, right? Because there's different jobs to do here when we talk about segmentation. It's about how do you prioritize what you want to do ultimately? That's what defines a strategy. So what do you do? What don't you do? And in terms of who you want to talk to, what was useful for me is thinking about kind of where we want to grow, and where do we want to drive customer demand and acquisition, but where do we want to deepen and protect? And those are very different marketing strategies, as you guys will all know. But it's important, particularly in a brand like this, to rethink that, because lots of people make an assumption. So actually going out and testing, understanding, thinking, actually, okay, UK drivers really is our market. That's like over 50 million people. So instead of thinking just people who are interested in breakdown, what about everybody who's driving? What about the non-drivers who may need to then think about driving? Do we do a campaign that talks to them? And getting under the skin as well as, what does the market think and what do customers kind of currently think of you? A bit to my point on kind of Red Dwarf and Cricketer. The interesting thing when we looked in the archives of what the AA does is back in like 1920s or whatever, there was an interesting like leaflet that talked about getting more than just breakdown in your subscription. So it's quite interesting how there's actually a bit of a heritage for a broader product mindset, which is exactly the transformation journey that I was trying to go on 56, well, more than that, years later, right? So quite interesting to see what might be embedded in people's heads. And always questioning sort of why, you know, and how you prioritize what's important. And then finally, the why, so understanding your role, both historic and today. So this can often get kind of clouded in, I think, it feeling a bit fluffy for the kind of exec or senior level of the business. But actually, what I've found is, particularly in the private equity world, they use the word brand a lot because ultimately the brand is the thing that they want to sell. So how you ladder into that language and you ensure that everything that you talk about is not only rooted in, you know, the business objectives that they want to achieve, therefore they're going to hit their bonus, their KPIs, what they want to do with the business. You can understand who, as in who you target, and understand your customer base a little bit more, as well as the market, as I've said. But the why actually is critical as well, because the brand is the thing that is of value ultimately. So what is it that you did do as a brand? Why did you form as a brand? What is the customer need or the customer problem that you solve? It's interesting thinking about what did you do and what do you do now, because in the case of the AA, for example, we actually, as per that leaflet that I just showed you, did talk about broader services back in the day, but then kind of lost our way a bit, or just decided commercially that being a breakdown business was the thing that we would really focus on and root in people's minds. But as a result, we've then lost the opportunity to be that little bit more emotive, kind of broader driving brand. And then why is it that, you know? So what is the value of what you do? Because that's ever changing, right? So what's interesting, as I said about the driving landscape, is as younger demographics come through, they have a completely different view of the car, of how it works, whether it breaks down or not, whether they're going to get digital diagnostics, whether there's more analysis, whether they want more convenience, do they actually want everything tracked via the app? To what extent do you balance kind of the human value of the AA, the person being there helping you, alongside the kind of digital capability? And will anyone care, I suppose I've thrown in there, from the fluffy point of view, because I think you can quite easily come up with a sort of a purpose and a why statement, but you've got to live it to the core. I listened to Rob here earlier on the Aston Martin stuff, and I think that's really interesting on, you know, just getting to the core of what's important for the business, both internally for people so that you can galvanise that feeling, but also externally. If people didn't know, we actually were a little just to try and make the AA a bit cooler than it is. We started as cycle scouts, hopefully not quite as serious as this bloke looks, but cycle scouts who would warn drivers of speed traps coming up round the corner. So we were actually kind of a little bit pirate, a little bit edgy back in the day. This was all about business strategy into marketing strategy. I suppose the reason I've dwelt a little bit on the business strategy and getting to that kind of what, who and why is because for me that is the absolute core of determining the marketing strategy, right? So I think quite often you can devise the marketing strategy almost separately from the business strategy. So it's almost a role I think we should all take on, as to really understanding the commercial imperative and the commercial narrative of what the business is trying to achieve, who we want to speak to and who we want to acquire, because ultimately that delivers value and volume. Like, you know, do we focus more on volume of bringing people in? Do we want less people but they're more valuable to us? How do we determine that? And our role, both historic and today, and how that is wrapped up in how we want to potentially sell a business ultimately, or think about a business differently, is really critical. So the business strategy then, you know, this is very kind of Mark Ritson and stuff, obviously then determines the marketing strategy and tactics. And from a marketing strategy and tactics perspective, this is where my mission has basically been more than a breakdown company. more modern and relevant and relatable and sort of slightly more interesting for young drivers. How do we think about young drivers? They're not hugely valuable right now, but they will be in years to come. How do we start to build those perceptions? I've sort of gone a bit wrong here because I've jumped straight into marketing comms. This obviously is about product pricing and comms as well. But the thing that I've done over the last couple of years to sort of transform this view of the AA, which hopefully you're starting to see trickle through, is about brand identity, so refreshing and rethinking about our brand identity. We brought in these lovely movement lines and kind of different fonts. We've actually updated the logo slightly as well. We didn't spend loads of money on that, don't worry. It wasn't one of those kind of brand logo agencies, but we softened it and made that feel a lot more modern and relevant. Our marketing comms, we're more tight on who we want to speak to when. And we also built this new campaign, It's Okay, I'm with the AA, around the purpose of creating confidence for drivers, which was the new purpose that the exec set. So again, back to that why, we did a lot of work thinking about that, went back into the archives. The exec were very clear. It's about creating confidence for drivers. That's what we want to do. My question was, how do we create confidence for drivers? Because it's easy to say that. Loads of brands love saying they are a confidence brand. But how do we do that? And for me, it was about anticipating drivers' needs, a bit like the speed trap thing. We were always one step ahead of what the driver wanted, and that's where Always Ahead comes from. So we created a new brand platform around Always Ahead, and we created a new tagline, It's Okay, I'm with the AA, which allowed us the flexibility to do both kind of emotive storytelling, if it's someone's had an accident and it's a deeply difficult situation and there's a phone call with a contact centre and we're having to be very human about that, to adverts that you may have seen where a meteor hits a guy who's just bought his first car on a residential estate, or someone's swallowed their car keys, for example. And things with social, so starting to work a little bit more in spaces where we can tap into slightly younger demographics. We work with Lad Bible on some more targeted work on social, and work with the guys at Corrupt FM, which was absolutely brilliant last year. And I'm sort of pinching myself a little bit that we're able to do this with the AA, but it shows that you've got, you can flex the brand. The important thing is that it all ladders into the business strategy. So when obviously I was going to present some of this work, which is a little bit more risky perhaps than our CEO might always like, it's always rooted in, and this is the business strategy, right? We're saying it's okay, I'm with the AA for a broader mix of products and services. We're saying we're always ahead. Even things down to the logo and the brand refresh, we're all about, this is a brand that needs to look a certain way, feel a certain way as a result of your strategy to bring in these types of people, drive volume and value to the business and so on. So it's important that that's all laddered in. So then I suppose what I'm trying to say is this is the outputs, right? And this is the tactics that then are laddered off all of the work that you do up front that determines the what, the who, and the why. And a few tips on that from a kind of tactics point of view that worked for me was kind of, as I've said, tie it to business strategy, but kind of keep it simple as well. Don't overcomplicate. I think we like overcomplicating. It's very easy to in marketing comms, but actually a new line, a new campaign, there's quite a lot for people to take in there. So how does that work? For me, being bold is important, particularly when media budgets are tight and you're having to fight for those as well. So what's the riskier option? What I quite like doing, which my agencies kind of love me for, is you pitch that, but what was the wild card? What was the thing that pushed it even further? And then let's kind of move backwards from that, because let's face it, we're in quite a fun industry. We're trying to get attention. We're trying to generate demand. Why not be a little bit bolder than you perhaps thought you were going to be? Important to do that with leaning on existing memory structures, and that isn't just the yellow and black. Obviously, those things are massively important, colours, but also wording like Join Today, the fact we're a membership organisation. What does membership feel like in the modern world, and so on? And how do you bring those nuances through? Measuring success. Obviously, we need to do that, and I suppose thinking about that up front is important, and continuing to kind of optimise as you go. How I've done this from a transformation point of view, I thought I would share as well, because again, this ladders a little bit into, the execs sit there with their business strategy. They then say, okay, over to you, marketing. You need to justify why you're doing what you're doing, be really clear on how it routes back into their business strategy. And there's ways of doing that, right? It's very easy to put up slides and say, wasn't it easy doing all of this? And Aaron will know, for example, guy from the AA that I work with in the back here, it's hard work. This isn't easy. I have lost quite a bit of hair doing this. And you have to take people on the journey, and you'll each, in your own world, have different business stakeholders that you need to engage with. But the things that have helped me are continuing to visualize that end goal. So being pretty ruthless about we're going to do, okay, right, we might not get quite there, but that's what we're aiming for. So if we keep aiming, we'll get at least 80% there. Or if we get a certain percent this year, what does next year look like? So how do you just keep visualizing that end goal, being resilient and pragmatic as a result, keeping it simple, which I've said both in thought and articulation. If you overcomplicate, you lose people who are, particularly people who are very busy in a business. If I sat down with our CEO and talked in detail about why the kerning on the particular font really laddered into his vision to, he's not interested. What is the simple information he needs, and how do you articulate that? Repetition and momentum is absolutely critical. And if you're not kind of in the game of being relentlessly, exhaustively, repetitious, even if that's a word, about how you want to deliver what you're delivering, why you're delivering it. That in turn brings momentum, and that brings followers along with you. So that's important. Commercial focus we've touched on. And then, kind of this can-if positivity, I think, is pretty important. I think lots of people kind of look to marketing as the ones who are having fun. I think, how do we switch that a little bit into we're the ones that inspire things, we're the ones that are quite positive and move things forward. We're not doctors. We're doing stuff that's important and it's got commercial importance, but we can be bold and creative and have fun with it. And I suppose my final point, without sounding too cheesy, is I think to truly transform and to take a business strategy into marketing strategy, your business needs creative problem solvers, and they probably need it more than you think. And when I say creative, I don't mean someone who's just really good at creating an advert or, coming up with a graphic design. I mean creative thinking in terms of go-to-market with product, with pricing, that open mindset, that curious mindset of how you drive things forward. They need that. They want that positivity and that drive. So that, I would say, is important too. That's me. And there's a few minutes if we want to have any questions. I appreciate I've rattled through quite a lot.